If you would write a book, if a book would be written by many people who've been prominent on fame, what would be a story or a technique that you would add to this book? Not on how to become famous, but on how to deal with it, because you're such a down-to-earth guy and you've been a great friend and mentor of mine for many years, but your art has been viewed by literally hundreds of millions of people, which is kind of insane if you think about it.
Yeah,
Also, to
yeah.
technology, so it seems that this number is gonna just gonna get more eyeballs over as
Yeah,
the
well,
humans do.
well they're re-releasing the Twilight series. They're doing another theater release of all the Twilight movies in like October. So
Oh,
there will
really?
be plenty millions more, I'm sure, on that one. But yeah, no, yeah, I mean, for me, I think the biggest thing that I guess I wish I could have known or thought of or whatnot in my earlier years, and it maybe would have helped me stay with my acting more, steadily at that point, is just before you really do anything in life for anybody else, you need to think about yourself. You need to, and of course you could call it being selfish or whatnot, but what I mean by that is if you can't love yourself and you can't love what you're doing or what you're producing or the job you do or anything, then you can't really expect anybody else to follow that either, and that's one of the things now, especially just coming out of, a 10-year relationship and realizing that I never I never gave myself that time. I never gave myself the time to think about what I was doing, think if it was what I wanted to be doing or anything. I just always just kind of like went from one thing to the next, relationship to the next, to the next. I didn't give me myself that time to just learn how to love myself and live with myself. And I think that leads into a lot of the world's pain these days is the fact that people just can't live with themselves. And therefore then they start doing everything for everyone around them. And obviously doing things for other people is good, but when you can't see anybody doing that for yourself or you can't do it for yourself, then are you really going to be happy, you know, exhausting yourself basically for everyone around you? I think that would be my kind of life lesson that I've learned as far as just, yeah, if I was able to have a conversation like this when I was 16, 17, going through all my like child abuse and the pedophilia and whatever and blah blah blah, the industry, that was the one thing is I hated myself. I hated who people thought I was because it wasn't who I actually was. They knew about Cameron Bright, not Cameron Krigger. All they cared about was Cameron Bright. And so because at the heart of it, I didn't enjoy myself or my life, then it just doubled down when I wanted out of it. My only option was to get out of it. It wasn't, oh, stick through it, you'll be fine because you know what you're doing is it makes you happy. Whereas I thought everything I was basically doing was making everyone around me happy and me more miserable. The money I had didn't do anything but allow me to, basically feed my addictions and feed my pain at that point. I had zero guidance really, for anything. My mom tried as hard as she could, but I was a rebellious teenager who had, six-figure bank account and, you know, n- no guidance, no real mentors, like, yes, obviously I worked with amazing people, but again, I've kind of, I think I've mentioned it to you before, but the acting industry is very weird in the fact that you're in such a bubble for x amount of time when you're working, especially when you're in literally like a foreign country. Like when I was in China, you're even in more of a bubble with the people that you're working with, and you live and work with these people like every single day all day for 2 to 3 months. So you make these crazy like flash relationships where you get to know people like really deeply because again, like you don't have anybody else to talk to. You, at that point, those are the only people you can relate with. After your work that day, you normally go home and hang out with the people you're working with because you're in a foreign city or a foreign country or you're just somewhere where you don't know anybody else. But then 9 times out of 10, you know that when that job is done, you're probably never going to see those people again. And so it's very strange way to grow up as far as yeah, I would say that I had all these mentors. You know, I probably could have reached out to Robert De Niro and stuff like that. But in my mind, I'm like, Robert De Niro doesn't care about me. You know what I mean? He's got bigger fish to fry, right? So I still felt alienated after I left set, you know, especially for me then as a kid too, where like I couldn't go out with the crew when I was 13 years old, 14 years old and everyone else would go back to the hotel. Well, they go down to the hotel bar and have some drinks because they're adults. Well, I was stuck in my room alone by myself playing video games, you know? So that was kind of my, you know, one of my main teachers in life was video games. You know, like it's funny even now to this day, and my mom and stuff all like drop like history on her, and she'll be like, "Where'd you learn that?" I'll be like, "A video game," and she'll be like, "Oh, like you learn things from those," and I'm like. Yes, mom. Like, I'm like, I'm not sitting around playing Fortnite. It was like, you know, back in the day for me, I was playing like World War II history based games. I was playing Age of Empires, you know, things like that that are, you know, yeah, they're video games, but they're what they're based off of is are true events, you know. So I think in life, that's kind of what got me into learning or wanting to learn, I guess I should say, about, you know, history and everything, because yeah, we are, you know, we are creatures of habit. And you know, history repeats itself every day, right? So, you know, if you can learn from anything, learning from your past or learning from someone else's, you know, what am I trying to say? Life or experiences is one of the easiest ways to kind of figure out the world around you, in my opinion, you know. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, long story short, I would say that that is what I would my 2 cents in a encyclopedia of how to live being in the spotlight in any way is just being, you know, comfortable with yourself and your choices and your decisions, because then, you know, who cares what anybody else thinks, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
Do you think two things? First of all, I love the fact that you mentioned the fact that video games helped you in your journey of maturation. It's like one of the things I feel is really useful is to study history from a ego player perspective, as if you're a participant in it from both
Hmm.
sides in a way, and
Yeah.
like video games do a great job of it. And in regards to the environment of this just traveling uh, circus, do you, if you could travel back in time to the Cameron who couldn't go down and have the drinks with all these other guys, is what would be a piece of advice you would give yourself back then on what you know right now after a decade of digesting this crazy journey that you had there?
Like, you know, sounds funny to say, and it's I'm probably because now I'm in my 30s now, but it's just, you know, life moves on. Don't worry. You're 12. You'll figure it out. This isn't the end of the world there, big guy. But yeah, no, you know, for me, obviously it was difficult as well being, you know, just a male in that life, not really having, you know, my dad in my life, right? Not having that kind of father figure. Of course, we can always look back and, you know, there's always going to be the coulda, woulda, shouldas. But yeah, I don't know. I don't, you know, it's funny because you kind of, you know, everyone always mentions the whole time capsule thing and what, you know, what would you tell your 10-year-old self? And I don't know, you know, at the end of the day, I think it would be something as simple as kind of what I just said, you know, just don't, don't worry so much about the people around you, you know, or at least people's opinions, I should say. Obviously, you want to care about the people around you, but yeah, I don't know, you know, it's just kind of that. We're just try and enjoy it, you know. Obviously, there's times where you're gonna hate, whatever you're doing in life. I feel like, it's very hard for anyone to find true happiness. Um, but yeah, I think it would have just been that in itself. Just make sure to take care of yourself, before worrying about other people.
Do you
Because
think
again,
a doses of self-hate is necessary to achieve extraordinary things?
I think you kind of have to go through those times. I mean, I don't know anybody who has loved themselves or their life every day of the week. I'd love to meet one of those people. but, but yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely one of those people where like, life is just that. It's life. It's never gonna be perfect. There's always good with the bad, and you have to learn how to deal with all of that. I look at very much so. I look at, the youth today, and not to get too far into it, obviously, but the participation badge way of today, um, and then sadly, again, not to get too far into it, but then we have, the days of the school shooters and these days where you have these young adults that are in their 20s who have almost been given too much freedom and too much niceness, whatever, kindness, because then when they turn 21 or 22 and they're felt they have to deal with true adversity in their life, they don't know how to handle it. And then that's when this rage and this outrage and this hate and everything comes, because they haven't dealt with that for the first 20 years of their life, because everyone nowadays just walks people through things. They don't have to deal with bad grades in school because grades are basically not irrelevant now. It's like it's just certain things that, sadly enough, life can be shit,